Merry Christmas. I'm Liz Mathis.
And Happy New Year. I'm Bruce Downey. Welcome to the KCRG-TV9 News at Christmas.
The new year is always a time for reflection, and for the next hour, we'd like to take a look back at 2004. We filed thousands of news stories in our 21-county viewing area this year. We traveled as far north as Decorah in Winneshiek County and to the south, Sigourney in Keokuk County. Our reception area extends to the west, where we reported on issues in Tama, Toledo, and to the east in Dubuque.
There are several behind-the-scenes people who put together our newscasts. You'll hear what our news producers have to say about the 10 most important stories of the year. Our photographers who brave rain, sleet, snow, and dark of night will be offering up their opinions on the best video of the year. And later, you'll hear from the weather and sports departments on the stories that most impressed them.
Now, our news department meets often during the day to discuss just what will go into our newscast. It's really a collective voice and a democratic process. Now, here are the top 10 stories for 2004 with a roundtable discussion from the TV9 producers.
All of our producers agreed the top story of 2004 was the presidential election and the political activity leading up to it.
It was just such a drawn-out story. Like, it wasn't something that just happened for a week, when we covered it. It was something we covered for a year on a daily basis.
And people were very adamant about who they supported and why.
One visit after the other. It was hard to actually focus on election day because we were so busy with the next visit.
People who've never been interested, whether it's because of their children, grandchildren, for whatever reason, they're voting. It's really interesting.
The Iowa caucuses in January put the state on the map, drawing candidates and media week after week. Senator John Kerry surged from a field of candidates with 38% of the vote.
And I make you this pledge, I have only just begun to fight.
John Edwards received 32% on caucus night, and last-minute bungling by the campaign of one-time frontrunner Howard Dean left him with only 18%.
Washington, D.C. to take back the White House!
As the year went on, John Kerry emerged as the Democratic nominee for president and selected John Edwards as his running mate. By late fall, polls showed the race between President Bush and Senator Kerry was just too close to call, and Iowa was clearly a battleground state. Bush and Kerry visited the state repeatedly, and the campaign rose to a fever pitch. Campaign rhetoric began to wear on Iowans.
We're all tired of it. We'll be glad it's over.
Election day finally came, but on the night of November 2nd, the race was still too close to call. It wasn't until November 4th when Iowa Secretary of State released unofficial numbers showing that Bush had edged out Kerry by more than 13,000 votes in Iowa. The state's presidential numbers weren't official until November 7th.
Our number 2 story of 2004 is the flooding and storm damage in eastern Iowa.
I've never heard phones ring like that for any other story. I mean, it was just constant, like people calling from our entire viewing area, just nonstop saying what was going on in their area, how bad it was flooded, what was happening, a levee broke here. Like every line on the phone was lit up for 2 days.
Sometimes we really know what we're dealing. I mean, we could have a ground crew on the way that's going to be on the road for a couple hours, but you put Bobby over it and you can sure know which places to send them to quickly.
Spring brought torrential rains in late May. Indian Creek once again threatened residents in the Sun Valley area of Cedar Rapids. Sandbagging and hand-wringing were a way of life for several days until the water receded.
But there comes a point that if we get a big jump in the amount of water that's coming through this watershed, these won't hold it.
This video was perhaps the most dramatic. Flash flooding in Marion trapped these kids on the bleachers at the Linmar football field. They had to be rescued by an emergency team. But the most devastating floods hit Garber and Elkport in Clayton County. The swollen Volga River swallowed the towns, and when it backed away, the town was uninhabitable.
Parents are trying to find a place to live. They won't be coming back here. Hard.
31 homes were destroyed. Throughout the summer, residents tried to negotiate with the federal government on buyouts. And today, they're still waiting on their money. When you travel through Elkport, there are signs that tell looters to keep out. Tornado damage was also rampant in eastern Iowa. This was the scene on May 21st near Palo, after a twister hit and destroyed several homes and farms.
I crawled in the tractor cab and down below the steering wheel, below the seat, and pulled a sweatshirt over my head and done a lot of praying.
The road also. So that road must...
The deployments and the homecomings. The local angle to the war in Iraq is our producer's third choice in the year's top 10.
Just so many families affected in our viewing area. I mean, anybody that you probably talk to knows of someone that has been affected by the events in Iraq.
We covered several send-offs like this one for the 25 members of Company B of the 334th Forward Support Battalion. They were heading overseas for 18 months. And it was a year of reunion.
Like, wow, we both made it home. He looked good, looks happy. It was good to see him.
It was also a year of joy. Jan Abel and Sarah Stannard decided to get married while Jan was on a 2-week leave from the fighting in Iraq. The Cedar Rapids couple said distance had become a big part of their relationship. And there is sorrow. Most recently, Spencer native Guardsman Darrell Davis died in a Humvee accident in Iraq. That was on November 29th. Since the War on Terror began, 26 Iowans or people with Iowa ties have died in fighting or supporting U.S. troops.
At number 4, the expanded gambling debate brought a year-long discussion into our newsroom.
There's not a lot of gray area in between. I mean, it's a pretty hot issue that people either want it or they don't, and they aren't willing to back down on their views of it.
It kind of represents Iowa in many ways. It's how Iowa is wanting to grow both as a state and then also individual cities.
Gambling is just, I think it just says something about Iowa, how perhaps our focus is shifting.
You know, so sometimes when a story is going on in a smaller community, it really can still affect the large base of our viewers.
We have expansion of gambling.
The Iowa legislature started the year with debate about expanded gambling. The State Racing and Gaming Commission had asked lawmakers for direction on issuing more gambling licenses. The state had imposed a moratorium on gambling licenses in 1998 to slow the growth of the gambling industry in Iowa. After the political hot potato bounced back and forth between the two groups for a few months, the moratorium was lifted on June 10th. By November, 10 different community groups showed up at the State Racing and Gaming Commission office. They were carrying armloads of information and $40,000 for application fees.
Combination of the local ownership in the community, the commitment we've made to the not-for-profit in the community, that it will carry the day for us.
No decisions will be made until next year on which casinos will be granted licenses.
Story number 5 is an ongoing debate that's been brewing for years: where to put Linn County's trash and the controversial siting of a landfill.
It started 9 years ago, this landfill thing, when Blue Stem came in here and they were trying to gather support.
It is a huge story for people in Linn County.
Isn't controversy, though, one of those top 5 things when you look at what makes a great story?
In January, former Marion Mayor Vic Klopfenstein said landfill expansion at County Home Road, the county site number 2, was forced upon the city of Marion when previous plans fell through.
I don't know if they understand how much that hurts. They just boom went through and no discussion, just 8 votes yes, and that hurts.
That decision came from the local solid waste agency, a body consisting mostly of elected officials.
We have acquired land under condemnation, and we are bound legally to use that land for the public purpose it was condemned for.
But Marion would not give up the fight. For the entire year, it tried to block the expansion.
Marion has one direction to grow, to the north, and a little to the west. That's it. That's it. We're surrounded by Cedar Rapids and Hiawatha, other than in that direction.
The County Planning and Zoning Board kept tabling action that the Solid Waste Agency needed. By October, the Solid Waste Agency offered Marion $2.2 million to drop the fight. Marion did not take the offer. In mid-December, the Cedar Rapids Area Chamber offered to pay for a mediator so the two groups could come to terms. And as we say, the story continues.
Story number 6 was both a national and local story: the flu vaccine shortage that affected millions of people.
It's a public health issue. It's not just necessarily affecting Iowa, it's affecting the entire country.
That day when that came out, late in the afternoon, we switched all the rundowns around. That was leading 5 o'clock. The more we heard about it, it was the 6 o'clock lead that night too. And I remember there was something else going on that night at 10, but we chose, because of the public health issue, to lead our 10 o'clock news also with the flu vaccine shortage.
Word came early in the fall that there would be a flu vaccine shortage. The British company Chiron, one of the manufacturers of the vaccine, announced a sterility break in their vaccine. There was a recall and production was stopped. The shortage began and doctors recommended vaccinations to people over the age of 65, those who suffered from a chronic health problem or small children.
By getting the flu shot this season, that'll try to keep them a little healthier and they won't miss as much school.
We want to immunize more children than ever before, because we know that that will reduce the impact of influenza on our community.
When the vaccine did come in, many waited in long lines to get it, only to find out there wasn't enough. The Visiting Nurse Association suggested other ways to prevent the spread of flu. Another shipment of vaccines arrived at local clinics and hospitals in mid-December.
News at 2 of the state's universities was our producer's pick for number 7.
It's such a highly visual story that you just really can't pass it up. I mean, we are TV. We're all about pictures, and if somebody sends that to you in the mail, and it's of the damage and of the story that you've been talking about for the last 2 days, yeah, it's going to go on the air.
At the University of Iowa in Iowa City, vandals broke into 2 research laboratories. The Animal Liberation Front took responsibility for taking lab rats and smashing computers. University of Iowa President David Skorton says the activists who targeted the school's labs committed a crime against society. And this spring, violence rocked the annual Visha celebration at Iowa State University in Ames. Police say things turned violent when they broke up a party. Hundreds of students crowded onto Welch Avenue in the heart of campus town. And from there, things turned ugly. After the dust settled, ISU's president didn't want to risk more violence the next year. That's why he suspended the celebration for the first time in its 82-year history.
Schools are battling budget issues, and that has affected thousands of eastern Iowa school children this year. That comes in at number 8. At the beginning of the year, the governor said Iowa's public schools would see a 2% allowable growth. The extra $145 million would come from putting a sales tax on a dozen services that were not taxed. But school groups across the state lobbied Iowa lawmakers to fully fund education. They wanted at least a 6% increase. Schools argued that 6% was the bare minimum needed to make up for years of slow or no growth funding from lawmakers. Superintendents said that schools couldn't cut expense proportionate to loss of revenue.
The cumulative impact of that is that we're falling far short. 6% is barely enough to get us back on our feet.
Rural school districts like Starmont near Strawberry Point would feel the pinch. Starmont has lost 200 students in the last 9 years.
Will be to look at reducing our expenditures the best we can. We're going to try to do it through attrition before we have to do any massive staff layoffs.
And finally, the legislature agreed on a 4% increase by the end of the session this year.
Story number 9 was a hit-and-run accident that developed into a personal and emotional story about a young woman.
Abby was a daughter, a friend, a sister to someone. And I think for everyone who walks across the street, kind of like Kelly said, those people have the same role, and I think you can visualize what would happen if you lost someone close to you like that.
Abby Bowman was killed while walking across First Avenue in downtown Cedar Rapids. She was leaving work at the Crown Plaza Hotel. In a matter of hours, flowers and cards covered the sidewalk across the street from the site of the accident. Friends and family say Abby Bowman was a girl everyone knew. The story became even sadder when we learned her boyfriend was about to propose.
That was my one. That's me complete.
The driver of the car that hit her, 47-year-old Larry Zaruba, had several prior traffic charges. He now faces a charge of vehicular homicide.
And rounding out the top 10 stories of the year, Cedar Bend and the effort to get Vision Iowa money.
Well, I think everybody agrees that that part of town needs to be developed, but it's a situation where the voters are saying how much involvement should the government have in it? How much involvement should tax dollars have in it?
It's the issue that will never die. Like, just when you think it's over, it's resurrected into something new.
Young people, they keep saying they've got to target us, but it's so true. How do you keep people in Iowa? Well, you got to find some reason for them to stay.
The year started on a down note for the Cedar Rapids project that's been called River Run, Destination Southside, and finally Cedar Bend. You'll recall the Vision Iowa Board took back a $10.5 million grant to redevelop the area around Czech Village in December of 2003. Voters had turned down a 1-cent local option sales tax that would have provided matching funds for the plan. Supporters tried to convince the board they deserved that money, but board members wanted more financing information. Another plan was proposed to Vision Iowa in August. Again, they recommended leaders scale back. By October, the award was made. $5 million to help build a $35 million project.
It's been said that a picture is worth 1,000 words.
And up next, the TV9 photographers tell us about their most memorable video of 2004. We'll be right back.
There are times like this when our photographers are in the right place at the right time. Welcome back to our hour-long special, TV9 News at Christmas. And we take it for granted sometimes, but there are photographers behind the pictures we show on television.
They're on call every day of the week, every hour of the day to make sure that we can capture some of those great stories. And tonight they tell us about their best video, their most memorable stories of 2004.
It's going out in the field and gathering video and bringing something to the viewer at home that they couldn't see normally, you know? Like, exactly like when we were out here doing this. Being able to take someone else somewhere where they've never been and let them experience something almost firsthand by getting them beautiful close-ups, showing the video, nice vivid imagery, you know, taking somebody somewhere where they can't go with video, and that's what I get out of it. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy telling a story. It was a different experience lugging a 30-pound camera around on a boat trying to shoot as it's going 30 miles an hour up the stream, but you know, you know, I think we ran over our scheduled shoot time by about 2 hours or something that day, but it was a good time. We got to see a lot of wildlife on the river. The person from the DNR that we were shooting with said that there was a swan's nest, so we went there to see the swan's nest, and he said it was very rare what we were getting to see. The swans were actually hatching out right as we arrived with the camera, and that was something that I was able to catch on tape. I enjoy being able to tell a story with video, because I think a lot of times people may not realize it when they're watching a story, the role that video has in the impact on the story. A lot of times you pay attention to the words, but the video is kind of subliminal. It's something that just soaks in, and when you get done watching something, you might have a certain feeling and not realize why, but a lot of times it's because of the video.
You like to see the emotion in people, and you like to tie that together to tell the story that, hey, this does affect somebody. It may not be you, it may not be somebody you know, but it is affecting somebody, and you never know when this could affect you. I'd say probably the most memorable and the best story that I went on, being a UNI alumni, had to been when UNI made it to the tournament. I mean, that was just exciting. The first time I'd ever been to a NCAA tournament. I've done a lot of things, and that was the first time I'd been to a tournament. So following my alumni alma mater to a tournament, that was just great. Being there with all those fans when they brought the trophy in after winning the tournament, that was just an awesome moment to be there. So I do a lot of stuff, and I see a lot of people, and I'm in a lot of interesting places, but then when people ask me about it, especially if I'm at a school and I'm with kids, they say, well, what have you done? Or I could say, well, I've interviewed so-and-so, or I've been to see the president, and they're like, oh, ah. And then for me, personally, I've done it how many times it just gets to be, oh, I got to go see the president again.
The biggest story for me for 2004 wasn't necessarily a story, but a series of stories. It was a number of candidates that visited Eastern Iowa for the election in November. And here's just a few of what we covered at TV9. This is what I got. Vice President, 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 John Edwards, John Kerry, John Kerry, John Kerry, John Edwards in Waterloo, John Kerry in Cedar Rapids, and John Edwards. I remember the most was out at Kirkwood in July. I believe it was July 20th, probably one of the hottest and most humid days of the year. And we walked into this rec center that wasn't supposed to open until August. I don't think it was designed for hundreds of people, but they crammed as many in as we could get in. And it was so hot in there that the president's shirt was soaked through, and it was almost nauseous. And Nick Liu and I barely made it through without getting nauseous ourselves.
The military will always
I like
be
to meet
our
people, and it's interesting to be involved with whatever big story there is of the day, whether it's the president or some type of breaking news. We're there, and it's not always excitement that we like, but we have to cover it, and we owe it to our viewers.
As a photographer, I like the pictures, and I like action, and I like strong visuals and sound. Usually when you do fires,
we've been setting fires inside the house.
Not only do you have the visual aspects, but you're also dealing with some tragedy for someone. Here was a case where we were doing a fire story, but not only was it not a tragedy, but it was also helping and could help in the future, because here we have a house burning down, we have fires set on purpose for training purposes. In this story, there were some very visual elements where you could see the firefighters fighting flames that you normally wouldn't be able to see, and again, you have, the pictures are, they're beautiful, they're nature, they're showing the destructive aspect of fire. Every day is a new experience and a chance to see something or to talk to someone that I wouldn't get a chance to otherwise.
You just try to capture what's there, I mean, sometimes you got to get creative so you have some different shots to work with when you come back and edit, but the main thing is to capture the story for the people that aren't there. You have to remember that they're not there and that you are the way that you're bringing them to that story or bringing that story to them. I think I probably like that the best. I think it was the most powerful stuff that I shot all year, just seeing the veterans walking around and experiencing that. It seemed like it was kind of long overdue for that memorial to be built, and it was really pretty powerful being there. So I guess as a photographer, you just do the best you can to try and capture that. Having someone there from eastern Iowa, from our viewing area, that I knew even just a little bit, made it even more powerful.
It's too brutal.
I go out and I shoot stories. It's not an in-studio thing. It's out in the field. You're gathering stories. You see a little bit of everything. You see a lot of real happy stories. You see a lot of real sad stories. It really varies it's a wide spectrum of things.
I went over to Ames to cover Iowa State and Northern Illinois, and I think it was in the first half. As a sports photographer, the shot you're always looking for is the shot that's coming right at you. And I was standing in the back of the end zone, pretty much where all the other photographers were, and threw a long touchdown pass. And when the ball goes up in the air and it's coming right at you, your eyes, every photographer's eyes that shoot sports, their eyes kind of light up, and that's kind of what mine did. And then you start thinking, stay in focus. Your first thought is catch the ball, catch it. This is going to look really good if he catches it. He catches it, and then you're like, stay in focus. I got to stay in focus, which on these old cameras is kind of tough because you can't even tell. But so he did catch it. I thought I was in focus, and he runs right over to the back of the end zone and stops right in front of my camera. It was a good shot, and I felt good about it because it was my first week on the job, and you always kind of want to make a first impression. So I was like, no, that's good video.
Having been in this business for so long, not a whole lot awes me anymore, quite honestly. It's a lot of it is, I don't know, I assume it would be the same if you're in the same market. I've been here almost 19 years. I'm from Waterloo, so I'm very familiar with the area. I've been doing the morning show with Diane for the past year, and that's been a new experience. We try to be live every morning, doing something different, and I really like live television. I have been doing this for a long time, and to me, live television is a good challenge because you basically have one shot to get it right. I mean, we do 4 shots a morning, but each live shot we try to make different as much as we can. And so you basically have one chance to get it right. You just have to learn to be flexible in this business because you never know. I always tell people I don't know what I'm going to be doing until 5 minutes before I'm doing it.
I picked the junk rhythm story for McKinley School, and it was a program where it was kind of like the musical stomp. They took the different garbage cans and sinks and banged on them, and I thought how lame that I'm going to go cover this story. I just thought it was going to be really lame, but when I got there, it was awesome. And so it's just, you never know what to think when you're going to a story. The sound and the visuals were incredible. Also, I mean, it was just a good program for the kids. This was what I thought was awesome. I mean, they weren't in like a formal music class, they were in this class, and it was just really cool that the joy that the kids got out of performing. There's so many opportunities in this story to get the video, where a lot of stories, I mean, it's easy to set up a sequence because getting somebody taking something out of the refrigerator and putting it on the table, that's an easy sequence to get, and there's not a whole lot of thought put into it. But this was so much stuff going on, I had so many choices. It was like a regular story would be like sitting at dinner at home, and you have your choice, you know, you have your set choices, where this story was like going to a buffet. It was just everything I could think of. I don't think people really realize what, because they just hear the reporter's voice and see the reporter, and it's kind of like, I've always thought the reporter is kind of the brain of the story and I'm the eyes and the ears.
Well, the one everyone talks about was the Palo tornado that was in May that I got just by luck. That's the first time I've ever seen the sky be green, like they say. And the rotation above us before the tornado came into our view, the rotation above us was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. And you never knew if one was going to form and just come down right on top of us. And so I even got the rotation, and it's so evident you can just see the clouds swirling. And yeah, it made the hair on my arm stand up. That was that intense. The video that I liked was the flooding in Oxford Junction. It was when the Wapsie surrounded the Legionnaire Ballroom, and I like that one because I'm from around that area. I've been to receptions in that building, and the story that we did was about this bride and groom who were going to have their wedding reception there that weekend that it flooded. You know, that's something that you planned your whole wedding for however long, and then Mother Nature puts a dent in your plans.
Some things like that are best understood from the air, and a picture's worth 1,000 words, especially from the air, maybe 10,000. The widespread storm damage, it's something that you don't see from the ground, so I have that unique ability to put it into perspective and to make it visual and understandable. I see so much of it, so one shot of a flattened field looks like just any other shot of a flattened field. But as I fly several hours a day, and the viewer can't be with me for several hours, in my mind it builds up. What a catastrophe, you know? I'm acre after acre, mile after mile, and I can show you a good example of a field, right? But I can't show you all of eastern Iowa and how much significant economic damage was done by a storm, whatever, a storm or a flood, winds or hail. It's always more massive in my mind than it is to the viewer or what I can present. And that's a little frustrating, you know, but you'd be even at a bigger disadvantage without the helicopter and the aerial view. But you know, something people should really understand, a flood or widespread storm damage, it really is bigger even than what you see on TV. Some of our stories are fast, you know, a car crash or a fire. Some are slow, floods and snowstorms. You see them coming, you kind of know they're coming, they're predicted to come, they happen, then they develop, then there's consequences. You know, every story has its own pace, even a story from the air.
Up next, there are times when we're not rushing around covering breaking news.
And we get to take extra time to tell a memorable story. A few of those up next.
Welcome back to the KCRG-TV9 News at Christmas.
There are some stories that leave a lasting impression, like the one Nick Glue did about smoke detectors.
There are concerns about whether a smoke detector would wake your children while a fire spread through your home.
It's a fairly new problem discovered by only a handful of similar studies nationwide. And Nick placed 2 night vision cameras inside a bedroom where a 7-year-old and his 9-year-old brother were sleeping.
And 2 children who had practiced an escape drill with their parents.
It's 11 o'clock on a school night for 9-year-old Doug and 7-year-old Matt.
They've been sleeping since 8 o'clock and have no idea that tonight they'll be tested.
We've got one in each room, instead of trying to reach up and do that.
Their father is a Cedar Rapids firefighter who made it a point to review fire escape plans just days before. But on this night, his hopes turned to humility. When the alarm first sounds, 9-year-old Doug responds immediately by opening his eyes. However, it takes 13 seconds for 7-year-old Matt to do the same. At this point, both boys seem to be awake, yet neither seem to be in a hurry to get out of bed. In fact, after 3 minutes, Doug pulls a blanket over his head to block out the noise.
Frankly, I'm amazed. Being a firefighter, I'm a little bit more in tune with fire safety, and I practice with our kids at least once a week. Our fire escape plan, what you do when the smoke alarm goes off, and I'm very stunned that there's no reaction at all.
The kids had a chance to redeem themselves in round 2, conducted just 10 minutes later. This is video of a fire in a similar bedroom to illustrate the importance of a quick response. In our second test, Doug actually gets out of bed after 48 seconds. He crawls to his bedroom door, just like he's been trained to do. But he leaves brother Matt behind. And you can see it takes less than 2.5 minutes for this bedroom to be fully engulfed. You can also see that Matt is fast asleep.
2 minutes is absolutely critical. We believe that you need to get out from the time your smoke alarm sounds within 2 minutes.
In each test, the boys open their eyes quickly and look to be awake. Dr. Andrew Peterson says don't be fooled. People can walk around the house and still be sleeping.
The first kid finally woke up. I suspect he's not fully awake either. Whatever it is that makes us drowsy accumulates longer you're awake. So there's this pressure to sleep that builds up. And the first 4 hours of the night tends to be harder to wake somebody up anyway.
It could be similar to one of our alarm clocks that we have in our bedroom, so I don't know if they've equated it with that, or we need to review actually what the smoke alarm sounds like.
The boys say they heard the smoke detector, but even after it beeped more than 5 minutes, Matt had no excuse for staying in bed.
How come you didn't do it this time? What? Tired? Lazy? You just wanted to sleep?
Yeah.
What if it happened for real in the middle of the night?
Nick Glue, KCRG-TV9 News.
The Consumer Product Safety Commission is now in the middle of a 2-year project to study which sounds are more effective in waking children when there is a fire. And the Cedar Rapids Fire Department says regardless of these findings, everyone should still have smoke detectors in their homes.
The conflict in Iraq dominates daily headlines, but another war was in the news in May. The $174 million World War II memorial in Washington, D.C. was dedicated. It honors 16 million World War II vets, 400,000 who lost their lives, the 4 million still living, and the 1,200 aging vets who die each day. The memorial was an important backdrop for our fathers' untold stories.
It's quite a monument, you know. It reminds me of, well, not necessarily a cemetery, but it reminds me of that we placed a monument for all our fallen comrades.
My dad served in the Army during World War II. Jim Ruman was in the 8th Infantry Field Observation Battalion.
In the Battle of the Bulge, I was north of that.
He's never really talked much about the war.
You would have told us if we would have asked you.
Yeah, some of it.
Some of it, but not all of it.
No, it's too brutal.
Dad and Mom are part of that proud generation, those who have gone about their work without complaint. After 4 years in Europe, the wide-eyed Iowa farm boy was a man.
I can still remember the first casualty in our outfit.
But those who come to visit that actually live through this experience, you know, they're teaching us.
The memorial's architecture is classical, traditional. There are huge eagles, wreaths, patina ropes, beautifully bronzed battles.
So we see what Iowa looks like.
All the states engraved in a roll call of the nation.
The gold stars represent those who fell. There are no names in the World War II memorial. As I said, over 400,000. We have them all labeled here with gold stars.
Each representing 100 casualties.
We stood on a hill and watched, and the bomber would go down, and we were praying that they'd get out alive.
The memorial serves as a history lesson.
What do you remember about Truman?
Truman? I had great regard for him.
And a life lesson.
Are you glad you're here?
Yeah, very glad.
We did another story the following night and received several emails, letters, and calls from sons and daughters whose fathers had served. They were all pleased the memorial had finally been built.
The Mississippi River is a thing of beauty, and there are countless birds, fish, mammals, and mussels that live in its splendor.
And Cassie Willis produced a special this summer on the mighty Mississippi and the Grand Excursion. She visited the Upper Mississippi National Wildlife and Fish Refuge, a group that's purpose is to preserve and protect.
That's a bachelor flock, they call them. The unique thing about this refuge is it actually is the longest refuge that we have in the lower 48. It's the 260 miles long. It runs from Wabasha, Minnesota, downstream to Rock Island, Illinois. It encompasses 4 different states along that route. We have 3.5 million visitors a year. The refuge was originally established in 1924 for the protection and the preservation of habitats that are essential to migratory birds, wildlife, and fish as well. We have the highest density of eagles right now that we've had since the refuge was established. A good story. This nest has 2 eaglets in it, but it's a tough one to see. We'll try. In the McGregor district, we have 80 active nests today that we're aware of. 1969, we had 1. 1973, we had 2. Another success on the refuge would be the trumpeter swans. 1903 was the last recorded trumpeter swan nesting that we had on the refuge. Today we'll be looking at a trumpeter swan nest down towards Potosi, Wisconsin. Oh, the others are pipping. They're hatching right now. And that bird is actually, like I said, literally hours from hatching, that one. Cool, there's a bill sticking out of one of the eggs. When the locks and dams were put in, essentially what it did was create lakes. It changes from a free-flowing river system to a series of impounded lakes. Back in 1924, most of the folks were using canoes or rowboats. We didn't have huge boats zipping up the river 70 miles an hour. Well, now we do. And we've had to change as a result of that in order to continue to protect this resource. Well, the future of the refuge really is in the hands of you, me, everybody in the United States.
Cassie tells us that catching those baby swans while hatching was a very rare experience.
Up next, we'll hear from our weather team about this spring storm.
And find out what the sports guys think was their top story of the year. Stay with us.
This was a defining moment this year, May 21st. Almost everyone in our viewing area was affected by these storms. Welcome back to our special TV9 News at Christmas. And weather was the top news story during several days in 2004.
We talked with Denny Frary and Joe Winters about a significant weather coverage day this spring, May 21st.
It started, as many storms do, it started on the small side. And we were watching them develop in north central Iowa, as I recall that day. And then they really started to fire up in Grundy County, and that's where we had our first warnings, our first tornado warnings in Grundy County.
And it's the same complex of storms that ultimately developed and produced about 6 tornadoes across the TV9 viewing area that day, along with very, very heavy rains, flooding, and some high winds.
And then we knew we were in for some trouble because the fact was it was getting later in the day, the heat and humidity was building up. So we knew this cluster of storms was coming right in from Grundy County in toward Benton and Lynn and Jones, for example, right at what we call the prime time. So that's when the heat and humidity is there, and those storms can really tap into that.
I mean, as far as severe weather season itself, we had a couple of days like this, and certainly if you were in Palo or you're in portions of Jones County, Martell area, this would have been the big storm. They would say it's probably one of the worst years they've seen. But yet, overall across eastern Iowa, not a lot of severe weather throughout the entire summer. It was fairly quiet throughout much of July. August was fairly quiet as well. This was really the big day that we had.
As is usually the case, we don't have to look far to see other folks who had it much worse. I think particularly this year you have to balance what we had with what went on in Florida, for example, with the hurricane season. And they haven't had in 30 years such a nasty hurricane season as they had.
Winter, we really didn't have a lot of winter weather to deal with. And temperatures generally were pretty normal. The summer, quiet and cool, no real extremes. So a very, I don't know, untypical year in the sense that we didn't have a lot of extremes across Iowa, which sometimes we see.
When I'm looking at a situation like that, I think of a lot of things. I guess I focus particularly on telling the story the best way we know how. And in our particular case, we have a lot of help.
Be it severe weather that we see in spring or summer or winter weather, we need to know when and where it's going to happen.
But we can't ever forget that people are affected by this stuff. And as long as we keep that in mind, I think we're going to be okay.
And as they always say, we save the best for last. Our sports department, we asked them to come up with their top 5 local stories of the year.
So let's do a countdown to number 1. At number 5, the Linn-Mar boys basketball team made a dream a reality when they held up that first place trophy at state. Linn-Mar came away the state's Class 4A champs.
Counting down to number 4, the UNI men's basketball team was outstanding in the spring. They finished tough and made it to the NCAA tournament.
At number 3, Coach Dan McCarney gets his ISU Cyclones to really pump up the volume after the first few games. The football team came away with the Big 12's North Division title.
At number 2, the University of Iowa football team's ride to the top of the Big Ten. The team's looking forward to the Capital One Bowl on December 31st.
And the number 1 local sports story of the year, Cedar Rapids golfer Zach Johnson hit the big time. Johnson went to the British and U.S. Opens this year, and at the nationwide tour event, Zach received the Player of the Year award from arguably the best player who's ever played the game, Jack Nicklaus. Zach became only the 3rd Iowan to win a PGA event after his victory in the Bell South Classic.
It was awesome, and TV9's Scott Sable was so excited he jumped in a car and he drove all night to Atlanta to get this story.
On the tee from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, starting today, first place at 13 under par, Mr. Zach Johnson. With a 3-shot lead in the final round of the Bell South Classic, paired with the 8th-ranked player in the world in Padraig Harrington, Zach responded with a birdie on the first hole while his dad, Dave, looked on. The gallery was full of Zach Johnson fans from Iowa. Iowa! Waterloo!
The first hole I heard, Waterloo, way to go Iowa!
Yeah, I heard that too. That kind of got me going. So, sport's been amazing. It's amazing where you turn up, or where I show up, and there's Iowa people. It's absolutely unbelievable.
The Petersons from Cedar Rapids hopped in their car and drove all night long to watch the final round in person.
Are you crazy?
Yep. Talk to him. He's the crazy one. He wanted to go.
Why'd you want to go?
Well, I've always liked Zach. He's a really good player, and my dad was saying, he's small like me when he was little, so I wanted to go out here. He's kind of my hero.
Did you drive part of the way?
No.
Your dad drove the whole way?
Yeah.
And what a show Zach put on. Thanks to some great approach shots and steady putting, Johnson built a 5-shot lead over the field. But then his putter started to let him down on the back nine, where he bogeyed 3 out of 4 holes.
He really had to battle today, too, didn't he?
It's a tough day today. You know, you were out there and wind was tough and conditions were tough and low pressure, so.
Shows what he's got inside.
Yeah, I think so. More than what his dad has right now, I can tell you that.
Zach had a 1-shot lead coming to 18. As you can see, it's a pretty intimidating finishing hole, but he knew exactly what to do. Play it safe.
Absolutely, absolutely. 3 off the tee and played as a 3-shot hole, and five's a birdie. So that's what we wanted to do, and actually I don't think I missed a shot the last 3 holes, so I'm pretty proud about that.
Still, you're staring at a 4-footer, and you were here before a couple of years ago and had some problems on 18.
Yeah, believe me, that crossed my mind briefly for sure. I was saying some scripture and trusting my God, and it worked out great.
Zach handled the pressure on 18 like a champion, winning the Bell South Classic by 1 stroke over Mark Hensby. Good for $810,000.
I just wanted to play my best, and I never doubted myself, that's for sure.
I know that people automatically think about the cash, but it's not. That's so far down our thought process. There's so much more to it than that, and it's just, you know, his dream and the job security of knowing that we have a place to play the next couple years.
You know, he's just gotten better each year, has worked very hard at it, and we're just very proud of him.
After the win, Zach gave the investors who got him started financially in pro golf high fives.
Yeah, we get 50% of this pie. It's a one-year contract. We renewed it every year, and we're out of it now, and he's on his own with corporate.
Doesn't need your help anymore, does he, guys?
We need his help now.
You guys are riffraff now.
That's right. Let's just come along and enjoy the ride.
But we get perks.
This is a day Zach Johnson will always remember. The first of many PGA Tour wins. He's that good. From Duluth, Georgia, Scott Sable, TV9 Sports.
And at that point, Zach was 12th on the PGA's money list with $1,145,000.
Not bad, is it? Up next, we'll have a little treat for you from everyone here at TV9.
So gather the kids for a Christmas poem read like you've never heard it read before.
In hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there.
The children were nestled all snug in their beds.
Thanks for joining us for KCRG-TV9 News at Christmas.
2004 was a memorable year, and we expect the same in the new year.
At KCRG-TV9, we produce thousands of newscasts, commercials, and special programming all through the year.
It takes almost 120 employees to create what you see here on TV9.
So we asked them to join in the Christmas spirit and help recite a holiday classic. Thanks for watching, and Merry Christmas.
'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house
not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse.
The stockings were hung by the chimney with care,
in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there.
The children were nestled all snug in their beds,
while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads.
And Mama in her kerchief and me in my cap
had just settled down for a long winter's nap.
When out on the lawn, there arose such a clatter.
I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter.
Away to the window I flew like a flash.
Tore open the shutters and threw up the sash.
The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow
gave the luster of midday to objects below.
When what to my wondering eyes should appear
but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer.
With a little old driver so lively and quick,
I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick.
More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came.
And he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer, now Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen.
To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall.
Now dash away, dash away, dash away all.
As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly.
When they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky.
So up to the housetop, the coursers they flew.
With a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too.
Then in a twinkling, I heard on the roof
the prancing and pawing of each little hoof.
As I drew in my hand and was turning around,
down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound.
He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot.
And his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot.
A bundle of toys he had flung on his back.
And he looked like a peddler just opening his pack.
His eyes, how they twinkled. His dimples, how merry.
His cheeks were like roses. His nose, like a cherry.
His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow.
And the beard of his chin was as white as the snow.
The stump of his pipe he held tight in his teeth.
And the smoke had encircled his head like a wreath.
He had a broad face and a little round belly.
That shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly.
He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf.
And I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself.
A wink of his eye and a twist of his head
soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread.
He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work.
And filled all the stockings and turned with a jerk.
And laying his finger aside his nose.
And giving a nod up the chimney he rose.
He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle.
And away they all flew like the down of a thistle.
But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight.
Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night.